It was just after 9 p.m., on a cold November evening when the sound of sirens pierced the quiet suburban calm of Brookhaven, Ohio. Moments earlier, a neighbor had seen headlights stopped awkwardly in the middle of Maplewood Drive, a silver SUV idling at the curb, its doors slightly open, its interior lights flickering in the drizzle. Inside, two people sat motionless. When the first officers arrived, they thought it was a car accident. But within seconds, that illusion shattered. The couple inside, Thomas and Evelyn Harper, were dead. Thomas, 52, was a high school history teacher known for his easy humor and tireless volunteer work. Evelyn, 49, managed the local library and organized book drives for underprivileged kids. Together, they embodied the kind of steady kindness that made them beloved in their small town. But to those who knew them best, the Harpers weren't just pillars of the community, they were saviors. 15 years earlier, they had adopted two young brothers from a chaotic foster system, giving them something they'd never known before: stability and love. The boys, Daniel and Mark, arrived when they were 7 and 5. Daniel, the older one, was cautious but bright, the kind of child who tried hard to please, soaking up his new parents' affection with quiet gratitude. Mark was gentler, more sensitive, always following his big brother's lead. For years, the family seemed unshakable. Vacations, Christmas photos, school plays, the Harpers were the picture of warmth. Their home, a 2-story house with blue shutters and a small garden, overflowed with laughter and stability. But something began to change when Daniel hit 16. He was talented, a gifted athlete, a solid student, but beneath that success was a growing restlessness. Friends noticed he had become irritable, quick to anger, and fascinated by risky behavior. The transformation was gradual, but unmistakable. By his senior year, Daniel had started experimenting with drugs, skipping practices, and lashing out at teachers. His once bright future dimmed under a haze of defiance. Thomas tried to help, offering to attend counseling sessions with him. Evelyn prayed harder, leaving notes on Daniel's desk that read, "You're stronger than this. We love you." But nothing seemed to reach him anymore. The warmth that had defined their home cooled into silence, broken by slammed doors and late-night arguments. Then, one night, something unexpected happened. A message appeared in Daniel's social media inbox from a name he hadn't seen in years: Angela Moore. She was his biological mother. The name hit him like a shockwave. Angela had lost custody when he was just a boy. Years of substance abuse, neglect, and repeated arrests had torn their family apart. But now, after all this time, she wanted to reconnect. At first, Daniel was skeptical. He remembered little of her, just flashes: a cigarette glowing in the dark, a voice shouting in another room, the smell of cheap perfume. But curiosity won. They started exchanging messages. Then calls. Then video chats. Angela told him she'd changed. She said she'd gotten sober, found faith, and was trying to rebuild her life. Yet, beneath the surface, her tone carried a venom Daniel didn't immediately recognize. Every conversation seemed to circle back to the Harpers. "They took you from me," she'd say. "They think they're better than me. They brainwashed you." At first, Daniel defended them. But the more he spoke with her, the more doubt crept in. She told him stories of how the system had stolen him. She whispered that Thomas and Evelyn weren't really his parents, they were keepers. People who pretended to care while taking what wasn't theirs. By autumn, Daniel was spending nearly every night talking to Angela. And soon, their conversations turned darker. Angela wasn't alone anymore. She'd fallen back in with two people she called friends, a man named Ricky Dale, and his girlfriend Tina Ward. Both had long criminal records and a reputation for quick money schemes. When Angela spoke of them, her voice carried excitement, as if this ragtag trio had given her a new purpose. And before long, that purpose would draw Daniel into a plan that would destroy everything his adoptive parents had built. The more Daniel spoke with Angela, the more her words started to take root. She painted herself as a victim, a mother wronged by a broken system, a woman robbed of her children by people who wanted to look good for the community. At first, Daniel resisted. He'd been raised to believe in second chances, to forgive, but not to forget. Yet Angela's voice, smooth, persuasive, full of emotional traps, found the cracks in his resentment. "They never loved you like I do," she said during one late-night call, her tone soft but insistent. "They wanted a trophy, two poor little boys to show off at church. You were their project, not their son." Daniel clenched his jaw. "That's not true. They took care of us." Angela laughed bitterly. "Care? Or control? You think they didn't judge you every time you messed up? Every time you disappointed them? You don't belong to them, baby. You're mine." That word, mine, stirred something raw inside him. By then, Daniel had dropped out of college, drifting between part-time jobs and late-night parties. He spent hours scrolling through social media, watching other people's lives move forward while his own seemed frozen. Every call with Angela made him feel both guilty and powerful, like he was reclaiming a piece of himself. When she introduced him to Ricky and Tina, he didn't know what to expect. Ricky was in his early 30s, muscular but with the weary eyes of someone who'd seen too many jail cells. Tina, thin and jittery, barely looked up from her phone. They met in a roadside diner outside Dayton. Angela had driven 2 hours to see him for the first time in over a decade. The reunion was awkward. Angela hugged him too long, her perfume sharp and heavy. She kept touching his face, whispering, "You look just like me." Over greasy coffee and cold fries, she started laying the groundwork for something much darker. "You know, Thomas has a lot of money saved," Angela said casually, stirring sugar into her cup. "Teacher's pension, life insurance. Bet they've got a fat policy on both of them. You and Mark would get it if anything ever happened." Daniel blinked, caught off guard. "What are you talking about?" Angela leaned closer, lowering her voice. "I'm saying they don't deserve what's yours. They took my boys, my life, maybe it's time you took something back." Ricky smirked. "Accidents happen all the time," he muttered. Tina giggled, her chipped nails tapping against her cup. "Could look like a robbery gone bad. Nobody'd ever know." Daniel's heart pounded. "You're crazy. I'm not hurting them." Angela reached across the table, grabbing his hand. "You wouldn't have to. We'd take care of everything. All you do is make sure they're in the right place at the right time." He pulled his hand away, shaking his head. "No. I just wanted to see you. That's it." Angela's face hardened. The sweetness drained away. "You think they'd hesitate to get rid of me if I was in their way? You think they didn't know what they were doing when they signed those papers? They stole you, Daniel. And now you're too blind to see it." He left the diner that night furious, at her, at himself, at the gnawing confusion twisting inside him. But the seed had been planted. Weeks passed. The holidays approached. The Harpers decorated the house as they always did, trying to mend the fragile peace. Evelyn hung garlands along the porch railings while Thomas wrestled with a stubborn string of lights. Mark helped in silence, avoiding his brother's dark moods. But Daniel's thoughts were elsewhere. Angela texted him constantly, guilt, flattery, threats, promises. "You'll see," she'd write. "Once it's done, you'll finally be free." Then, one message changed everything. "They're driving to the charity event Friday night, right? Perfect time. Ricky knows what to do." Daniel's stomach dropped. He typed back, "Stop it. I told you I'm not doing this." Her reply came instantly. "You already are. You told me where they'll be." That Friday night, the air was sharp with cold rain as the Harpers got into their silver SUV to deliver donations to a community drive downtown. Daniel watched them pull out of the driveway from his bedroom window, unease crawling through him. Far across town, Angela, Ricky, and Tina were waiting in a borrowed sedan, their headlights off, their breath fogging the windshield. The plan was already in motion. The rain had turned into a steady drizzle by the time Thomas and Evelyn Harper reached the intersection of Maplewood and Pine Hollow Road. The wipers moved in rhythmic sweeps, the only sound breaking the silence between them. Thomas hummed softly to an old tune playing on the radio, a habit Evelyn always found comforting. They were on their way home after delivering boxes of canned goods to the church charity drive. It was nearing 9 p.m. The streets were quiet, blanketed by a thin layer of mist that blurred the glow of streetlights. Back at the Harper house, Daniel paced his bedroom. His phone buzzed again and again, messages from Angela. Angela, it's time. Daniel, don't do this. Angela, you said they'd be on that road. That's all we needed. Daniel, I didn't mean for this. Angela, then don't watch. Just remember who you're doing it for. Daniel threw the phone onto his bed and pressed his palms against his temples. His heart thudded in his chest. He told himself it was just talk, that she wouldn't actually go through with it. But deep down, he knew Angela had crossed too many lines to turn back now. Across town, Angela sat in the passenger seat of the sedan, her fingers drumming on the dashboard. Ricky drove, his jaw tight, his eyes fixed on the wet road ahead. Tina sat in the back, clutching a baseball bat wrapped in tape. You sure this is the car? Ricky asked. Angela nodded, her voice calm, almost detached. Silver SUV. They'll stop at the light before the bridge. That's where we hit them. The trio parked near a stretch of trees, their headlights off. The hum of the SUV approached, just as Angela said it would. When the Harper's car slowed at the intersection, Ricky pulled out behind them, flashing his high beams. Thomas, thinking someone needed help, pulled over. That was all it took. Within seconds, Ricky and Tina were out of the sedan, masks over their faces. The rain masked their footsteps as they approached both sides of the SUV. Thomas rolled down his window halfway. Everything all right? He called. Ricky raised the gun. Out of the car. Evelyn gasped, clutching her purse. Please, take whatever you want. Thomas tried to calm her. It's okay, honey, just. The first shot cut through the night. Neighbors later said they heard 3, maybe 4 shots, sharp cracks swallowed by the rain. A few saw headlights flicker, then vanish. When the echoes faded, the street was still. The silver SUV sat half on the curb, its engine idling softly. Angela's breath came out in short, uneven bursts. She hadn't expected it to happen so fast. Let's go, she hissed. Ricky shoved the gun into his jacket, jumped back into the car, and sped off. Tina was shaking, staring out the back window. They weren't supposed to die, she whispered. You said just scare them. Angela didn't answer. Her hands trembled as she lit a cigarette, eyes glassy in the rearview mirror. Back on Maplewood Drive, the younger brother, Mark, was playing video games when he heard the sirens. At first, he thought it was just another call down the street. But when the doorbell rang, and the flashing lights reflected off his living room wall, his stomach turned cold. He ran outside barefoot, rain soaking his sweatshirt. The police were already there, 2 cruisers, paramedics, and yellow tape stretching across the road. An officer tried to stop him, but Mark broke past, yelling, "That's my parents. That's my mom and dad." The sight that met him would never fade. His parents' car sat motionless under the dim streetlight, windows shattered, the metallic smell of blood mixing with rain and gasoline. He screamed until his voice broke. The officers gently pulled him away, wrapping a blanket around his shoulders. One of them spoke softly, "Son, we'll find who did this. I promise." Back in his room, Daniel sat on the edge of his bed, shaking uncontrollably. His phone buzzed once more. "Angela, it's done. We're free now." He dropped the phone, staring at his reflection in the dark window, and for the first time, truly saw the monster he'd helped create. By dawn, Maplewood Drive was a maze of flashing lights and murmuring voices. The Harper's SUV had been towed, leaving only chalk outlines, shattered glass, and a heavy silence that clung to the cold November air. Detective Laura Bennett, a seasoned investigator known for her patience and precision, arrived on the scene just after sunrise. She had handled dozens of homicides, but something about this one struck her differently. The victims weren't random strangers, they were beloved members of the community. As she crouched beside a small evidence marker, she noticed the pattern of the bullet casings on the wet pavement. "Execution style," she muttered. No signs of struggle. They didn't even try to run. Her partner, Detective Marcus Shaw, frowned. "Looks like a robbery gone wrong. Purses, wallets, and jewelry are missing." Bennett nodded but didn't look convinced. "Then why leave the car running? Why not torch it? And who robs a couple in a neighborhood like this?" The first break came from a security camera 2 blocks away. The footage, grainy but usable, showed a dark sedan speeding away from the scene seconds after the shots. The license plate was obscured, but the make matched an older Ford model, one frequently seen in nearby Dayton. While the forensics team worked the physical evidence, Bennett began interviews with friends and family. It was during those conversations that she first noticed the older son's behavior. Daniel Harper sat at the dining table, shoulders hunched, hands trembling as he answered questions. Mark sat beside him, silent, his eyes red from crying. "I just don't understand," Daniel murmured. "They didn't have enemies. Everyone loved them." Bennett studied him quietly. His words were right, but his tone wasn't. There was a flatness to it, like he was reciting lines he'd already practiced. "Where were you last night?" she asked. Daniel hesitated, eyes flicking to his brother. "At home. I was asleep." "Anyone who can confirm that?" He swallowed hard. "No. Mark went to bed early." Bennett nodded, jotting it down. "And your parents, did they mention anything unusual before they left?" "No," he said too quickly. "Nothing." Mark, staring into his lap, whispered, "Mom said they'd be back by 10. The detective noticed Daniel's jaw tighten. Later, as she left the Harper house, Bennett turned to her partner. "Something's off with that boy." Shaw shrugged. "He just lost both parents, Laura. Shock'll do that." "Maybe," she said. "But shock doesn't usually look like guilt." 3 days later, lab results came in. The bullets were traced to a cheap, unregistered handgun often sold on the street, the kind tied to petty criminals, not professional hitmen. That detail shifted the theory. This wasn't a robbery gone wrong. It was personal. Then came the phone records. Thomas and Evelyn's final calls had been routine, to friends, to the church coordinator. But Daniel's records told a different story. In the days before the murder, he'd received more than 20 calls from a number registered to Angela Moore. The name triggered something in Bennett's memory. She pulled the adoption files from county archives, and there it was. Angela Moore, biological mother of Daniel and Mark Harper. History of substance abuse, multiple arrests, terminated parental rights. "Looks like Mommy made a comeback," Bennett muttered, flipping through the file. When detectives visited Angela's last known address, a rundown duplex outside Dayton, the place reeked of stale smoke and spilled beer. She wasn't home, but neighbors described her vividly, thin, loud, always talking about how her boys got stolen. One man added, "She's been hanging around with some rough people lately. A guy named Ricky, a girl called Tina." Their trouble. By week's end, Angela's face was pinned on the department's whiteboard, alongside Daniel's and 2 unknown associates. The pieces were beginning to form a shape, one Bennett didn't want to believe. When Bennett returned to the Harper home for a follow-up, she found Daniel sitting in the living room, staring at an old family photo. His hands were shaking slightly, though he tried to hide it. "Daniel," she said gently, "we've been going through your parents' phones. Did they ever talk to your biological mother recently?" He froze. The pause was almost imperceptible, but it was enough. "No," he said quietly. She's not part of our lives." Bennett leaned forward. "Then why's her number all over your call log?" Daniel's eyes widened. "You went through my phone. It's part of the investigation." Her voice softened. "Daniel, if you've spoken to her, we need to know. Anything could help us find who did this." For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, under his breath, "She just wanted to talk. She said she was sorry. I didn't think it mattered." Bennett exchanged a look with her partner. "Where is she now?" "I don't know," Daniel whispered. But his trembling hands told a different story. As the detectives left, Bennett felt the puzzle pieces locking into place. A resentful son. A manipulative biological mother. 2 low-level criminals. And a staged robbery that had gone far beyond control. She looked back at the Harper home one last time, its windows glowing softly against the evening fog. "Get a warrant," she told Shaw. "We're bringing Angela Moore in." The next morning, Detective Bennett's unmarked sedan rolled quietly down a cracked road outside Dayton, headlights cutting through the fog. The address they'd traced to Angela Moore's latest location was a decaying mobile home at the edge of a trailer park. Old Christmas lights hung from the porch, flickering weakly in the morning mist. Bennett and Shaw approached carefully. The air smelled of cigarette smoke and damp earth. From inside came muffled laughter, 2 voices, maybe 3. Bennett motioned to her partner, then knocked. The laughter stopped. After a moment, the door creaked open. Angela stood there, thinner than her photos, her hair tangled, eyes darting between the detectives. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice feigning innocence but trembling slightly at the edges. "Angela Moore?" Bennett said, flashing her badge. "We need to ask you a few questions about Thomas and Evelyn Harper." The name hit her like a blow. For a split second, her mask slipped, then she forced a smile. "I don't know what you're talking about. Those are the people who adopted my kids, right? Haven't seen them in years." Bennett tilted her head. "Interesting. Because your phone records say otherwise. You've been talking to your son, Daniel, almost every day for the past month. And 2 nights ago, his parents were shot dead." Angela's eyes flicked toward the couch behind her, where a man and a woman sat frozen. Ricky Dale. Tina Ward. Both matched the neighbor descriptions. "Step outside, please," Bennett said firmly. Within seconds, patrol cars pulled in, blocking the exit. Officers moved in swiftly. Ricky bolted for the back door, but Shaw tackled him to the ground. Tina began to cry, her hands trembling as she raised them. Angela didn't resist, just stood there, shaking her head slowly. "You don't understand," she muttered as they cuffed her. "They deserved it." At the station, the interviews began. Hours passed under the sterile glow of the interrogation room. Ricky cracked first. Faced with the threat of life in prison, he spilled everything. "It was her idea," he said, pointing at Angela's mugshot. "She said it was just gonna be a scare. She told us they had money, life insurance, a car, savings. Said her kid would get it all if they were gone." He leaned forward, rubbing his wrists. "The boy didn't know we were gonna, you know. She just said to make it look like a robbery." "Which boy?" Bennett asked. "Her son. Daniel. The adopted one. He gave her the route they'd take that night. Bennett's stomach tightened. She already suspected it, but hearing it confirmed made her heart sink. When she entered the next room, Angela sat with her arms crossed, her expression alternating between defiance and tears. "They stole my children," she said over and over. "I just wanted them back." "By killing two people who raised them?" Bennett asked coldly. "They were fake parents." Angela snapped, slamming her hand on the table. "They took my boys and made them forget me. Do you have any idea what that feels like? To watch someone else live the life that was supposed to be yours?" Her voice cracked, but the fury behind it was real. "You convinced your son to help you," Bennett pressed. "You made him believe they were the enemy." Angela stared down at the metal table, silent for a long moment. Then she whispered, "He wanted to believe it. I just gave him the truth." When Bennett showed her the text messages, the ones that proved she'd orchestrated every detail, Angela went still. The bravado drained from her face. "He didn't shoot them," she said quietly. "That wasn't supposed to happen." "But you planned it," Bennett said. "You told them when and where. You turned your son into an accomplice." Angela's tears finally came. "I was trying to fix what they broke." By nightfall, Daniel was brought in for questioning. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, his clothes rumpled. When Bennett entered the room, he couldn't even look at her. "You knew," she said gently. "You told her where they'd be." Daniel's voice was barely audible. "I didn't think she'd go through with it." "She did. And now your parents are gone." He pressed his fists against his forehead. "I thought she just wanted to scare them. To talk." "I never," his voice cracked, the rest of the sentence lost to a choked sob. Bennett let the silence stretch. Then she slid a photo across the table, the last picture taken of Thomas and Evelyn at the charity drive that night. They were smiling, hands clasped, unaware of what awaited them. Daniel stared at it, tears blurring his vision. "They didn't deserve this," he whispered. "They loved me. I wanted to know who I was. She made me think they were the reason my life fell apart." "Where is the gun?" Bennett asked. He hesitated, then whispered, "Ricky threw it in the river." That was enough. With the confession and physical evidence from the scene, shell casings, messages, phone data, the case was airtight. All four were charged, Angela Moore with first-degree murder and conspiracy, Ricky Dale and Tina Ward with armed robbery and double homicide, and Daniel Harper with accessory to murder. When the news broke, the town of Brookhaven was stunned. Vigils were held outside the church where Thomas had taught Sunday classes. Candles lined the walkway, flickering beneath photos of the couple smiling, reminders of a kindness that had touched so many lives. And as Daniel sat alone in his holding cell that night, the echo of his adoptive mother's final words replayed endlessly in his mind. "You're stronger than this. We love you." The trial of state versus Angela Moore began the following spring, drawing a crowd that filled the courthouse steps each morning. News crews set up cameras before dawn, their microphones pointed toward the small brick building that had become the stage for one of Brookhaven's darkest tragedies. Inside, the air was thick with tension. On one side sat the families, friends, and neighbors of Thomas and Evelyn Harper, people who had volunteered with them, prayed with them, and trusted them. On the other sat the defendants, Angela Moore, her expression hardened, Ricky Dale, restless and stone-faced, and Tina Ward, who seemed smaller than ever, her eyes swollen from crying. Daniel Harper sat apart. He had taken a plea deal, accessory to murder and obstruction of justice, in exchange for testifying against the others. Even then, he could barely bring himself to raise his head when he walked into the courtroom. The prosecution's case was airtight. Phone records, text messages, and witness statements painted a vivid picture of manipulation and greed. The state argued that Angela had orchestrated everything, convincing her son that his adoptive parents had stolen his life, then using him to plan their deaths for money she'd never see. In her testimony, Detective Bennett described the web of lies that led to the murders. It wasn't a crime of passion, she told the jury. It was a crime of resentment, a calculated betrayal of love. When Daniel took the stand, the courtroom fell silent. He looked thinner, his voice barely steady. "She told me they didn't love me," he said quietly. "She made me believe I was nothing to them. I didn't want anyone hurt. I wanted her to stop hating me." He paused, glancing at the framed photo of his parents displayed on the prosecution's table. "They were the best people I've ever known. And I let her destroy them." Angela sat motionless, her jaw tight. But when the prosecution replayed her recorded call, her voice saying, "They're on the road now, Ricky. Make it quick." Even she couldn't look up. After 6 days of testimony and 3 hours of deliberation, the jury returned. Angela Moore, guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit robbery. Ricky Dale, guilty of first-degree murder. Tina Ward, guilty of accessory to murder, given a lesser sentence for cooperating. Angela received life imprisonment without parole. Ricky received the same. Tina was sentenced to 25 years, eligible for release after 15. When the verdict was read, the courtroom erupted in a mix of tears and relief. Members of the Harper family held one another, whispering prayers. Daniel, sitting behind his attorney, broke down completely. He was sentenced separately, 15 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 10. The judge spoke firmly but with a trace of sorrow. "You were given love, stability, and every chance for a good life," he said. "But you let bitterness and deceit blind you. Your parents wanted the best for you, and though they're gone, I hope someday you'll live the kind of life they believed you could." Daniel nodded through tears, whispering a single word, "I'm sorry." In the months that followed, Brookhaven tried to heal. The church organized a memorial garden in Thomas and Evelyn's honor, 2 maple trees planted side by side, with a stone bench inscribed, "Love Endures." Every spring, their students placed flowers at its base, remembering the lessons that went beyond textbooks and library shelves. Mark Harper went to live with relatives in another state, far from the house that now stood quiet and empty. He finished high school, refusing interviews and avoiding the media. Those who saw him said he carried himself with a quiet strength, though the sadness in his eyes never quite faded. Detective Bennett eventually closed the case file and tucked it into storage. Yet sometimes, driving home through the same rain-slick streets, she'd catch sight of the maple trees swaying in the wind and think about how love, real love, could still be twisted by envy and desperation. In prison, Daniel kept a photo of his parents pinned to the wall beside his bunk. Every morning, he looked at it before the guards called count. He no longer spoke to Angela. The last words he'd ever said to her came during her sentencing, "You didn't just kill them, you killed everything good in me." Angela only stared at him in silence. Years later, Brookhaven still remembered the Harpers. Their story became both a warning and a prayer, a reminder of how easily love can be shattered by greed, and how redemption, though possible, often comes at an unbearable cost. As the sun set over Maplewood Drive one quiet evening, the 2 maple trees in the memorial garden glowed gold in the fading light. The wind whispered through their branches, gentle and mournful, carrying the memory of 2 lives lost to senseless betrayal, and a love that, despite everything, refused to die.